The screams of the tortured Voxari girl pierced the night, but no one on Zalos Prime gave a shit. No one except a human. In a dimly lit corner of a seedy bar, Michael Jones downed his whiskey and slammed the glass on the table. The hardened ex-Marine turned, mercenary scanned the room, his eyes moving from one alien face to another. Tension crackled in the air like a live wire. A hooded figure approached his table and sat down across from him. "You're Michael Jones, the human mercenary?" the figure asked, keeping his voice low. Michael leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. "Who's asking?" The figure pulled back his hood, revealing the scaly green skin and bulbous eyes of a Voxari. "I am Vortis, a diplomat of the Voxari people. I need your help." Michael snorted. "I don't do diplomacy." "It's not diplomacy I need." Vortis leaned forward, his voice urgent. "It's your skills as a warrior. My daughter, Arya, has been kidnapped by a rival clan. They plan to sacrifice her to their gods in a barbaric ritual." Michael raised an eyebrow. "And you came to me because—" "Because no one else will help us." Vortis slammed his fist on the table, drawing stares from the other patrons. He lowered his voice. "The Voxari are seen as primitive and warlike. But you humans, you have a reputation for getting the job done, no matter the cost." Michael considered for a moment. The money was good, and the job sounded challenging, but more than that, something about Vortis's desperation stirred a sense of duty in him that he thought he'd left behind in the Marines. "I'll do it," he said finally, "but I play by my own rules." Vortis nodded, relief flooding his features. "Anything, just bring my daughter back alive." Michael stood up, towering over the Voxari. "I'll bring her back, but you better have my money ready, and if you're lying to me—" He let the threat hang in the air. Vortis swallowed hard. "I understand." As Michael strode out of the bar, he couldn't shake the feeling that this job would be different. Saving an alien girl from a blood sacrifice. It was a far cry from his usual gigs. But then again, he was a human, and if there was one thing humans were good at, it was doing the impossible, even if it meant getting knee-deep in alien blood to do it. The journey to Vox Prime was long and arduous. Michael and Vortis took a small, unmarked spacecraft to avoid drawing attention. As they broke through the atmosphere, Michael got his first glimpse of the Voxari homeworld. Vox Prime was a wild, untamed place, with sprawling jungles and jagged mountain ranges that seemed to stretch on forever. Vortis guided the ship towards the capital city of Vortex. As they flew over the dense jungle canopy, Michael spotted the city in the distance. It was a strange blend of ancient stone temples and modern metal structures, all surrounded by a high wall. As they landed on a platform just outside the city gates, Michael noticed the looks he was getting from the Voxari guards. They eyed him with a mix of suspicion and hostility, their hands resting on the plasma rifles at their hips. "Stay close to me," Vortis muttered as they walked through the gates, "and try not to make eye contact with anyone." Michael couldn't help but chuckle. "I thought I was the dangerous one here." Vortis shook his head. "You don't understand. To the Voxari, humans are nothing more than violent, unpredictable savages. They think you can't be trusted. That's rich coming from a bunch of lizards who still practice blood sacrifices," Michael scoffed. As they made their way through the winding streets of Vortex, Michael could feel the eyes of the Voxari on him. He heard whispers in a language he didn't understand, but the tone was clear enough. These people didn't want him here. Vortis led him to a large, imposing structure in the center of the city. It was a massive stone pyramid, with intricate carvings and glowing energy fields surrounding it. "The Grand Temple," Vortis said, his voice tinged with fear. "This is where they'll be holding the sacrifice." Michael studied the temple, his tactical mind already working on a plan. He counted at least a dozen guards patrolling the perimeter, all heavily armed with plasma weapons. "We'll need to find a way in through the back," he said, keeping his voice low. "Once we're inside, we'll have to move fast. Find the girl and get her out before they even know what hit them." But as he took another look at the temple, Michael felt a sinking feeling in his gut. This wasn't going to be a simple smash-and-grab job. The Voxari were clearly more advanced than he'd given them credit for, and they weren't going to give up their prize without a fight. He checked his own weapons, a plasma rifle and a few grenades. It would have to be enough. He'd faced worse odds before and come out on top, but something about this felt different. Maybe it was the fact that an innocent life was on the line, or maybe it was the way Vortis looked at him, with a mix of hope and desperation in his eyes. Either way, Michael knew one thing for sure: he was in for one hell of a fight. Michael crept through the shadows of the Grand Temple, his footsteps nearly silent against the stone floor. His years of training as a Marine had taught him how to move undetected, and he put those skills to use now as he slipped past the Voxari guards. The temple was a maze of winding corridors and hidden chambers, but Michael's keen sense of direction kept him on track. As he rounded a corner, he heard voices coming from a nearby room. He pressed himself against the wall and inched closer, straining to make out the words. It was a group of Voxari priests, their tones hushed and urgent. "The Emperor's daughter must die at the appointed hour," one of them said. "Only then can we seize control of the Empire." Michael's eyes widened. Arya wasn't just some random Voxari girl. She was the daughter of the Emperor himself. The stakes of this mission had just gotten a whole lot higher. He moved on, his mind racing. If the rival clan succeeded in sacrificing Arya, it could throw the entire Voxari Empire into chaos, and if that happened, the repercussions could be felt throughout the galaxy. Finally, he reached the chamber where Arya was being held. The door was heavily fortified, with 2 armed guards standing watch. Michael knew he would only have one chance to get this right. He took a deep breath and then sprang into action, his plasma rifle blazing. The guards fell before they even had a chance to raise their weapons. Michael kicked open the door and burst into the chamber, ready for anything. But what he saw inside stopped him in his tracks. Arya was not the helpless damsel he had expected. She was standing tall and proud, her eyes blazing with fierce determination. "It's about time you showed up," she said, her voice steady. "I was starting to think I'd have to rescue myself." Michael lowered his rifle, a grin spreading across his face. "I'm impressed. Not many people could stay so calm in a situation like this." Arya shrugged. "I'm not just any Voxari. I allowed myself to be captured as part of a plan to expose the corruption in our government, but I didn't expect them to move so quickly with the sacrifice." Michael nodded, his mind already working on their escape route. "We need to get out of here before they realize what's happening. Can you fight?" Arya's eyes glinted. "Can a human shoot straight?" Michael laughed. "Fair enough, let's move." Together they raced out of the chamber and back into the winding corridors of the temple. Michael could hear shouts and alarms in the distance. Their escape had been discovered. But he wasn't worried. With Arya by his side, he knew they could take on anything the Voxari threw at them. As they ran, Michael couldn't help but feel a sense of respect for the young Voxari warrior. She had risked everything to try and bring about change in her society, even if it meant sacrificing herself. It was a bravery and selflessness that he rarely saw in the galaxy, especially among the alien races. But there would be time to dwell on that later. Right now they needed to focus on getting out of the temple alive, and with the entire Voxari Empire hanging in the balance, failure was not an option. Michael and Arya raced through the temple's winding corridors, their footsteps echoing off the stone walls. Michael's heart pounded in his chest, adrenaline surging through his veins. They were so close to freedom he could almost taste it. But as they rounded the final corner, they skidded to a halt. Blocking their path was a group of Voxari warriors, their crimson armor glinting in the dim light. These were no ordinary guards. They were the Crimson Guard, the Emperor's elite fighting force. Genetically engineered for superior strength, speed, and ruthlessness, they were a formidable obstacle. The leader of the Crimson Guard stepped forward, his plasma rifle aimed squarely at Michael's chest. "Surrender the girl, human," he hissed. "The sacrifice must proceed as planned." Michael's grip tightened on his own weapon. Not a chance, Scaleface. The Voxari warriors charged, their plasma bolts sizzling through the air. Michael and Arya dove for cover, returning fire with their own weapons. The chamber erupted into a chaotic melee of flashing energy beams and flying debris. Michael took down 2 of the guards with well-aimed shots, but the others kept coming. Their superior numbers and strength were starting to take their toll. A plasma bolt grazed Michael's shoulder, searing through his armor and sending a jolt of pain down his arm. He gritted his teeth and kept fighting. Beside him, Arya was a blur of motion, her Voxari-crafted blade slicing through the air. She moved with a grace and precision that Michael had never seen before, taking down guard after guard with fluid strikes. Together they pushed forward inch by bloody inch. The Crimson Guard fought with a ferocity that bordered on madness, but Michael and Arya's determination was unbreakable. They would not fail. They could not fail. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the last of the guards fell. Michael and Arya stood panting amidst the carnage, their weapons still smoking. Arya turned to Michael, her eyes wide with surprise. "I've never seen a human fight like that before," she said. "Your kind are not what I expected." Michael managed a grin despite the pain in his shoulder. "We're full of surprises." They ran out of the temple and into the dense jungle beyond, the sounds of pursuit already echoing behind them. As they fled deeper into the undergrowth, Michael's mind raced. The Voxari's technology was more advanced than he had anticipated, and their warriors were no joke. If he wanted to complete this mission and keep Arya safe, he would need to step up his game. But for now, all that mattered was putting as much distance between them and the temple as possible. The jungle closed in around them, a living, breathing thing full of untold dangers. But with Arya by his side, Michael felt like he could take on the whole damn galaxy. The jungle seemed to close in around Michael and Arya as they ran, the dense foliage blocking out the sun and casting everything in an eerie green glow. Michael's shoulder throbbed where the plasma bolt had grazed him, but he pushed the pain aside and focused on putting one foot in front of the other. Beside him, Arya moved with a fluid grace that made it look like she was born to run through the jungle. Her eyes scanned the undergrowth, alert for any signs of pursuit or danger. After what felt like hours of running, they stumbled into a small clearing. Michael held up a hand, signaling for Arya to stop. Something wasn't right. He could feel it in his gut. Suddenly, a dozen Voxari warriors emerged from the trees, their weapons trained on Michael and Arya. Michael raised his rifle, ready to fight, but Arya stepped forward and held up her hands. "Wait," she said, "we come in peace." One of the warriors, a tall Voxari with a jagged scar across his snout, stepped forward. "Arya, is that you?" Arya nodded. "It's me, Zaxor. And this is Michael, a human who risked his life to save me from the sacrifice." Zaxor looked Michael up and down, his eyes narrowed. "A human, huh? We don't see many of your kind around here." Michael shrugged. "I go where the money takes me." Zaxor grunted. "Well, you picked a hell of a time to come to Vox Prime. The government's in chaos and the rival clans are at each other's throats." Arya stepped forward. "That's why we need your help, Zaxor. We can't take on the government alone." Zaxor considered for a moment, then nodded. "Come with me, we have much to discuss." He led them deeper into the jungle, to a hidden rebel base carved into the side of a mountain. Inside, dozens of Voxari warriors milled about, sharpening weapons and tending to wounds. Zaxor led Michael and Arya to a small room filled with maps and tactical displays. "We've been fighting against the government and the rival clans for years," he said. "But we're outnumbered and outgunned. We need allies if we're going to stand a chance." Michael studied the maps, his mind racing. What if we hit them where it hurts? Take out their leaders and weaken their grip on power? Zaxor nodded. "It's a good plan, but it won't be easy. The rival clan's stronghold is heavily fortified." Arya spoke up. "What about the mysterious external force that's been supporting them? If we can find out who they are and cut off their supply of weapons and tech, it could give us the edge we need." Michael frowned. "External force? What are you talking about?" Zaxor sighed. We've been hearing rumors for months. The rival clan has been receiving shipments of advanced weapons and technology far beyond anything the Voxari have ever seen. We don't know who's behind it, but whoever they are, they're not from around here. Michael's mind raced. If there was an external force at play, it could change everything. They needed to find out who they were and what they wanted before it was too late. "All right," he said, "I'm in. Let's take these bastards down and save your empire." Arya grinned. "I knew you'd come around." Together, they huddled over the maps and began to plan their attack. It would be risky, but with the rebels on their side and Michael's skills as a warrior, they might just have a chance. As they worked, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that they were racing against the clock. Whoever this mysterious puppet master was, they had plans for the Voxari Empire. And if Michael and Arya didn't stop them soon, the consequences could be catastrophic. Michael hunched over the holographic display, his brow furrowed in concentration. Lines of data scrolled past, detailing shipments of weapons and technology from a company called Nexus Dynamics to the Voxari homeworld. At first, he couldn't make sense of it. Why would a human corporation be supplying arms to an alien race? But as he dug deeper, a pattern began to emerge. "Arya, take a look at this," he said, gesturing for her to join him. "Nexus has been providing the Voxari government with advanced plasma rifles, shield generators, even FTL drives, and in exchange, they've been given exclusive rights to mine Vox Prime's mineral deposits." Arya's eyes widened as she scanned the data. "Those minerals are essential for our own FTL technology. Without them, we'd be stuck using outdated hyperdrives." Michael felt a sinking feeling in his gut. "Don't you see? The Voxari government has been selling out your people to line their own pockets, and Nexus has been all too happy to oblige." Arya shook her head, her expression a mix of disbelief and anger. "I can't believe it. My own people, collaborating with humans to exploit us. Everything I thought I knew about the Voxari, about our place in the galaxy, it was all a lie." Michael placed a hand on her shoulder. "I know it's a lot to take in, but we can't let this continue. We have to confront the Emperor, demand answers." Arya nodded, her jaw set with determination. "You're right, let's go." But as they turned to leave, the door to the command center burst open. A squad of heavily armed mercenaries poured in, their weapons trained on Michael and Arya. "Well, well, well," the lead mercenary said, a cruel smile on his face. "Looks like we've got a couple of troublemakers on our hands. Nexus sends their regards." Michael's hand went to his plasma rifle, but he knew he was outnumbered and outgunned. Beside him, Arya tensed, ready to fight. "I don't suppose we could talk this out?" Michael asked, stalling for time. The mercenary laughed. "I'm afraid not. You see, Nexus has a lot riding on this little arrangement with the Voxari, and we can't have a couple of do-gooders like you mucking it up." Michael glanced at Arya, a silent understanding passing between them. They would have to fight their way out of this. It was the only way. In a blur of motion, Michael dove to the side, firing his plasma rifle at the nearest mercenary. Arya leaped forward, her blade flashing as she engaged another in close combat. The command center erupted into chaos, plasma bolts and sparks flying as the two sides clashed. Michael took a glancing blow to the shoulder, the searing pain nearly causing him to drop his weapon. But he gritted his teeth and kept fighting, taking down mercenary after mercenary with precise shots. Arya was a whirlwind of steel, her blade slicing through armor and flesh alike. But even she couldn't keep up the pace forever. A plasma bolt caught her in the leg, sending her stumbling to the ground. Michael rushed to her side, firing wildly to keep the mercenaries at bay. "Arya, are you all right?" he asked, his voice strained with concern. She nodded, her face pale but determined. "I'll live, but we need to end this now." Together they made a final push, Michael laying down suppressing fire as Arya charged forward, her blade flashing. The remaining mercenaries fell before their onslaught until only the leader remained. He backed away, his hands raised in surrender. All right, you win. I yield. Michael kept his rifle trained on the mercenary, his finger tense on the trigger. Talk. What is Nexus really after here? The mercenary sneered. You really don't know, do you? Nexus isn't just after the minerals. They want control of the Voxari Empire, and with the government in their pocket, they'll have it. Arya's eyes widened in horror. No, they can't. The Voxari will never submit to human rule. The mercenary laughed. You underestimate the power of greed. Your leaders have already sold you out. It's only a matter of time now. Michael felt a surge of anger. He had come here to save Arya, to help the Voxari, but now he realized that he had been played for a fool. His own people were just as guilty as the corrupt Voxari government. He lowered his rifle, his shoulders slumping in defeat. What have I done? He whispered. Arya placed a hand on his arm. This isn't your fault, Michael. You couldn't have known. But even as she spoke the words, Michael could see the doubt in her eyes. The realization that her people, her entire way of life, had been built on a lie. They had won the battle. But as Michael looked around at the carnage, at the blood on his hands, he wondered if they had already lost the war. The Voxari Empire was crumbling from within, and Nexus was poised to pick up the pieces. And he, a lone human, was caught in the middle of it all. Michael and Arya crouched behind a stack of crates in the dimly lit Nexus facility, their hearts pounding in their chests. They had managed to slip past the perimeter guards and make their way into the main complex, but they knew that the real challenge still lay ahead. The control room should be just up ahead, Arya whispered, consulting the stolen schematics on her wrist computer. That's where we'll find the evidence we need. Michael nodded, checking the charge on his plasma rifle. Let's do this. They moved quickly and quietly through the corridors, taking out the occasional security drone with precise shots. As they approached the control room, they heard the sound of screams echoing from a nearby chamber. Arya's eyes widened in horror. What was that? Michael felt a sinking feeling in his gut. I don't know, but we need to find out. They crept towards the chamber, peering through a small window in the door. What they saw inside made their blood run cold. Dozens of Voxari test subjects were strapped to operating tables, their bodies cut open and wired with strange devices. Nexus scientists in hazmat suits moved among them, taking notes and adjusting settings on the machines. My God, Michael breathed. What are they doing to them? Arya's hands clenched into fists, experimenting on them, using them as guinea pigs for their twisted science. Michael felt a surge of rage and disgust. He had always known that corporations like Nexus were ruthless, but this was beyond anything he had ever imagined. His own species, treating sentient beings like lab rats. We have to stop this, he growled. We have to expose what they're doing here. Arya nodded, her eyes hard as steel. Let's get that evidence and bring these bastards down. They burst into the control room, taking the Nexus technicians by surprise. Michael fired his rifle, dropping 2 of them before they could even reach for their weapons. Arya lunged forward, her blade flashing as she dispatched the others. Michael rushed to the main console, his fingers flying over the keys as he searched for the data they needed. I've got it, he exclaimed, holding up a data drive. Proof of Nexus's illegal experiments and their collaboration with the Voxari government. But before they could make their escape, alarms began to blare throughout the facility. Intruder alert, a robotic voice announced. All security personnel to the control room. Michael and Arya exchanged a grim look. They both knew that they were hopelessly outnumbered and outgunned, but they also knew that they couldn't give up, not when the fate of an entire species hung in the balance. They took up positions on either side of the door, weapons at the ready. As the first wave of Nexus security forces burst through, they opened fire, dropping them with precise shots. But more kept coming, pouring through the door in an endless stream. Michael and Arya fought with everything they had, their weapons flashing in the dim light. They moved in perfect sync, covering each other's blind spots and taking down targets with ruthless efficiency. But even they couldn't hold out forever. A plasma bolt caught Michael in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending him crashing to the floor. Arya rushed to his side, firing one-handed as she dragged him behind a console. "We can't keep this up much longer," she panted, her face streaked with sweat and blood. Michael gritted his teeth against the pain, forcing himself to his feet. "We have to. We're the only ones who can stop them." Just as all seemed lost, a massive explosion rocked the facility. The Nexus troops turned, confused, as a group of heavily armed Voxari rebels burst through the smoke. "For the rebellion," Zaxor roared, firing his plasma cannon into the ranks of the enemy. The rebels surged forward, engaging the Nexus forces in close combat. Michael and Arya joined the fray, fighting side by side with their new allies. Together they managed to overwhelm the Nexus troops and secure the facility. As the smoke cleared, Michael staggered forward, clutching his wounded shoulder. Suddenly a plasma bolt whizzed past his ear, missing him by mere inches. He spun around to see a Nexus sniper perched on a nearby catwalk, lining up another shot. Time seemed to slow down as the sniper fired again, the plasma bolt arcing towards Michael's chest. He tried to dodge, but his injured body was too slow to respond. At the last second, Arya leaped in front of him, taking the bolt meant for him. She crumpled to the ground, a smoking hole in her chest. "No!" Michael screamed, dropping to his knees beside her. He cradled her in his arms, desperately trying to stem the flow of blood. Arya looked up at him, her eyes glazed with pain. "Michael," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the chaos of the battle. "Promise me. Promise me you'll finish what we started. Free my people." Michael felt hot tears streaming down his face. "I promised," he choked out. "I won't let you down." As Arya's eyes fluttered closed, Michael felt a surge of rage and determination. He gently laid her body down and picked up his rifle, his eyes blazing with a new purpose. He would keep his promise to Arya. He would expose Nexus's crimes and free the Voxari from their grip, and he would do it not just for her, but for the sake of his own humanity. Because in that moment, kneeling over the body of the woman who had saved his life, Michael realized that he had found something worth fighting for, and he would fight for it with every last breath in his body. Michael clutched the data drive tightly in his hand. As he and Arya boarded a small, nondescript shuttle, they had to get this evidence to the Galactic Council to expose Nexus Dynamics' crimes against the Voxari people. It was their only hope for justice. But as they approached the Council's headquarters on the Central Space Station, a sinking feeling settled in Michael's gut. He had always known that politics were dirty, but he had never imagined just how deep the corruption ran. "I don't like this," Arya murmured, her eyes scanning the crowded docking bay. "It's too quiet. Where are all the guards, the security checkpoints?" Michael nodded grimly. "Something's not right. We need to be careful." They made their way through the winding corridors of the station, trying to blend in with the throngs of diplomats and bureaucrats. But everywhere they turned, they saw signs of Nexus's influence. Sleek corporate logos adorned the walls, and well-dressed executives whispered in shadowy alcoves. As they approached the council chambers, a group of armed men suddenly stepped out from a side passage, blocking their path. Michael recognized the insignia on their uniforms, Nexus's private security force. "Going somewhere?" the leader asked, his hand resting on the butt of his plasma pistol. Michael's mind raced, trying to come up with a plan. They couldn't fight their way out, not here in the heart of the Council's power. But they couldn't let Nexus stop them, not when they were so close. Arya's hand brushed against his, a silent signal. Michael nodded almost imperceptibly. In a blur of motion, they turned and sprinted back the way they had come, plasma bolts sizzling past their ears. They ran through the twisting corridors, dodging startled onlookers and leaping over obstacles. Michael's heart pounded in his chest, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He could hear the thud of heavy boots behind them, getting closer with every step. Suddenly a plasma bolt caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around and slamming him into the wall. He cried out in pain, his vision going black around the edges. Arya skidded to a stop beside him, her eyes wide with fear. "Michael!" she cried, dragging him back to his feet. "We have to keep going." He gritted his teeth and pushed himself off the wall, his shoulder screaming in agony. They ran on, stumbling and weaving, as the sounds of pursuit grew louder behind them. Finally they burst out of the station and into the bustling streets of Babylon 5. The station was a melting pot of cultures and species from across the galaxy, a neon-lit labyrinth of shops, bars, and shady dealings. Michael and Arya plunged into the crowd, trying to lose themselves in the sea of faces. But even here they couldn't escape Nexus's reach. Every corner they turned, every alley they ducked into, they caught glimpses of their pursuers, always just a few steps behind. As they huddled in a dingy alcove, catching their breath, Michael's wrist computer pinged with an incoming message. He frowned, tapping the screen to open it. "What is it?" Arya asked, peering over his shoulder. "It's encrypted," Michael muttered, his fingers flying over the keys. "Give me a second." The message decrypted, revealing a single line of text. "Meet me at the abandoned factory in Sector 12. I have information that can help you bring down Nexus. Come alone." Michael and Arya exchanged a wary glance. It could be a trap, a ploy to lure them out into the open. But what choice did they have? They couldn't run forever, and they needed all the help they could get. With a nod, they set off into the neon-lit night, their hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. Little did they know that they were walking straight into a trap, one set by the very man Michael had once trusted with his life. As they approached the abandoned factory, the hairs on the back of Michael's neck stood on end. Something about this felt wrong, like they were being watched from the shadows. They stepped inside, the rusted metal door creaking on its hinges. The factory was dark and empty, the only sound the drip of water echoing in the cavernous space. "I don't like this," Arya whispered, her hand tightening on the grip of her plasma rifle. "It's too quiet." Michael nodded, his eyes scanning the shadows. "Stay sharp, they could be anywhere." Suddenly a voice rang out from the darkness, a voice that Michael had never thought he would hear again. "Hello, Michael. It's been a long time." Michael froze, his blood turning to ice in his veins. He knew that voice, knew it like he knew his own name. It was the voice of his former commander, the man who had trained him, fought beside him, and betrayed him. The man stepped out of the shadows, a cruel smile playing across his lips. He was older than Michael remembered, his hair streaked with grey, but his eyes were as cold and hard as ever. "Commander!" Michael growled, his hand tightening on the grip of his rifle. "I should have known it was you." The commander chuckled, spreading his hands wide. "You always were a clever one, Michael. Too clever for your own good." Arya's eyes darted between them, her expression confused and wary. "What's going on here? Who is this?" Michael's jaw clenched, his gaze never leaving his former commander's face. "This is the man who betrayed me, who sold me out to Nexus, the man I once trusted with my life." The commander's smile widened, his teeth glinting in the dim light. "Betrayed you? No, Michael, I saved you. I showed you the truth about the galaxy, about the power that corporations like Nexus wield. And now I'm going to give you one last chance to join us, to take your rightful place at my side." Michael's finger tightened on the trigger of his rifle, his heart pounding in his chest. He had always known that this moment would come, that he would have to confront his past. But now that it was here, he found himself hesitating, torn between his duty and his loyalty. Arya's hand touched his arm, her eyes searching his face. "Michael," she whispered, her voice soft but urgent. "We have to go. We have to get the evidence to the people, to expose Nexus's crimes. We can't let him stop us." Michael closed his eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. She was right. They had come too far, sacrificed too much, to give up now. He had to be strong, to do what was right, no matter the cost. He opened his eyes, his gaze locking with his former commander's. "No," he said, his voice steady and calm. "I won't join you. I won't be a part of Nexus's lies and corruption, not anymore." The commander's face twisted in anger, his hand dropping to the plasma pistol at his side. "Then you will die," he snarled, his voice cold and hard. "You and your little Voxari friend." Michael and Arya dove for cover as plasma bolts filled the air, sizzling past their heads. They returned fire, the factory echoing with the sound of weapons fire and the shouts of the commander's men. Michael's mind raced as he ducked behind a rusted piece of machinery, his shoulder screaming in pain from his earlier wound. They were outnumbered and outgunned, trapped in a maze of metal and shadows. They needed a plan, a way out, before it was too late. Suddenly he caught a glimpse of movement out of the corner of his eye. A figure darting through the shadows, plasma rifle in hand. His heart leaped in his chest as he recognized the familiar green scales and piercing eyes. "Zaxor," he shouted, waving the Voxari rebel leader over. "We need your help." Zaxor nodded, his face grim and determined. He and his rebels had followed Michael and Arya, suspecting that they might need backup. Together they fought their way through the factory, plasma bolts flying and the smell of ozone thick in the air. In the end they emerged victorious, the commander and his men lying dead at their feet. But as Michael looked around at the carnage, at the blood and the bodies, he felt a hollow sense of victory. They had won the battle, but the war was far from over. Nexus's corruption ran deep, and they would stop at nothing to protect their interests. But Michael knew that he and Arya would keep fighting no matter the odds. They had the evidence and they had each other, and that was enough to give them hope, to keep them going, even in the face of impossible odds. As they walked out of the factory and into the neon-lit night, Michael took Arya's hand in his, feeling the warmth and strength of her fingers. Together they would finish what they started. Together they would bring justice to the galaxy, no matter the cost. Michael struggled against the restraints that bound his wrists and ankles, the metal cutting into his skin. He glared at the man standing before him, the man he had once trusted with his life. Colonel Nathaniel Blackwell smirked, his eyes cold and calculating. "I always knew you had potential, Michael," Blackwell said, "but I never thought you'd be foolish enough to throw it all away for a bunch of scaly savages." Michael gritted his teeth. "The Voxari are not savages. They're a proud and honorable people fighting for their freedom against the likes of you and Nexus." Blackwell chuckled. "Freedom? Is that what you call it? Wake up, Michael. The galaxy is a harsh and unforgiving place. The only thing that matters is power, and Nexus has it in spades." He leaned in closer, his breath hot on Michael's face. "But it's not too late for you. Join us and you'll have everything you ever wanted. Money, power, influence. You'll be a king among men." Michael's mind raced. A part of him was tempted by Blackwell's offer, the thought of never having to struggle or fight again, of having the galaxy at his fingertips. But then he thought of Arya, of Zaxor, and the other rebels who had fought and died for their cause. He thought of the Voxari, enslaved and oppressed by Nexus's greed. He shook his head. "No, I won't betray my friends or my principles. I'd rather die a traitor's death than live as a slave to Nexus." Blackwell's face twisted in anger. He raised his fist, ready to strike. But before he could, the room was plunged into darkness. Alarms blared and red emergency lights flashed. Arya, who had been working furiously at a console in the corner, grinned triumphantly. "I've hacked into the station's security systems. We have to move now." She tossed Michael a plasma rifle, and together they fought their way out of the room, leaving a stunned Blackwell behind. They raced through the corridors of the station, dodging plasma bolts and taking down Nexus mercenaries with ruthless efficiency. Their goal was the central broadcasting hub, where they could transmit the evidence of Nexus's crimes to the entire galaxy. But Blackwell and his forces were hot on their heels, determined to stop them at any cost. They reached the hub, but found themselves surrounded by heavily armed mercenaries. Michael and Arya took cover behind a console, firing desperately at their attackers. "We can't hold them off much longer," Michael panted, his rifle growing hot in his hands. Arya nodded grimly. "We have to transmit the evidence. It's the only way." They made a final, desperate stand, using every trick and tactic they knew to hold off the mercenaries. But it was a losing battle. They were outnumbered and outgunned, and their ammunition was running low. Just as all seemed lost, a massive Voxari rebel fleet emerged from hyperspace, weapons blazing. At its head was Vortis, his eyes filled with determination and fury. With the rebels' help, Michael and Arya were able to fight their way to the broadcasting console. They inserted the data drive containing the evidence of Nexus's crimes and watched as it was transmitted to every corner of the galaxy. In that moment, Michael knew that they had won. Nexus's crimes were exposed and the galaxy would never be the same. The Voxari would be free and he and Arya would be hailed as heroes. But the fight was far from over. Nexus would not go down without a fight, and there would be many more battles to come. But for now they could savor their victory and the knowledge that they had struck a blow for justice and freedom. The evidence of Nexus's crimes spread across the galaxy like wildfire, igniting a firestorm of outrage and rebellion. The Galactic Council, long seen as a bastion of stability and order, found itself in the crosshairs of a furious populace. Protests erupted on 100 worlds, with citizens demanding accountability and justice. Under immense pressure, the Council convened a special tribunal to investigate Nexus and its allies. The proceedings were broadcast live across the galaxy, with billions tuning in to watch the drama unfold. Witness after witness took the stand, painting a damning picture of corruption, greed, and abuse of power. Michael and Arya found themselves at the center of the storm, hailed as heroes by the Voxari and countless other species. They were invited to speak before the tribunal, to share their experiences and expose the true extent of Nexus's crimes. As they recounted their harrowing journey, the galaxy listened in stunned silence. But even as the tribunal worked to bring the guilty to justice, Michael and Arya knew that their fight was far from over. Nexus's tentacles ran deep, and there were still many operatives and supporters hidden in the shadows. They couldn't rest until every last one was brought to light. The Voxari rebel fleet, now under the command of Vortis and Zaxor, rallied to their cause. Together they launched a campaign to liberate other oppressed species, to break the chains of corporate tyranny wherever they found them. The Voxari, once seen as primitive and savage, now stood tall as champions of freedom. Michael and Arya, meanwhile, embarked on a new mission of their own. They would hunt down the remaining Nexus operatives, no matter where they tried to hide. Their quest took them to the darkest corners of the galaxy, to lawless worlds and hidden bases where the dregs of society gathered. They faced dangers and challenges beyond anything they had ever known, from ruthless bounty hunters to genetically engineered super soldiers. But they pressed on, driven by a burning desire for justice and a deep bond forged in the crucible of war. As they delved deeper into the shadows, they began to uncover a web of conspiracy that went beyond even Nexus. They discovered a hidden connection between the corporation and the highest levels of the Galactic Council, a secret alliance that had allowed Nexus to operate with impunity for decades. The truth was a bitter pill to swallow, but Michael and Arya refused to back down. They launched a series of daring raids and undercover operations, slowly piecing together the puzzle of corruption and deceit. They exposed the rot at the heart of the Council, the backroom deals and bribes that had allowed Nexus to flourish. But the cost of their crusade was high. Many of their allies and friends fell in battle, sacrificing themselves for the greater good. Michael himself was forced to confront the demons of his own past, the guilt he carried for his role in the atrocities he now fought against. In the end, after months of blood and sweat and tears, they succeeded in bringing down Nexus and its allies. The corporation was dismantled, its leaders brought to justice, and its ill-gotten gains seized. The Galactic Council, shamed and humbled, vowed to reform itself and root out the corruption that had allowed such evil to take hold. But even in victory, Michael and Arya knew that their work was not done. The galaxy had been forever changed by their actions, and the scars of the conflict would take generations to heal. They had won the battle, but the war against greed and oppression would rage on. As they stood on the bridge of their ship, watching the stars drift by, Michael and Arya made a silent vow. They would continue to fight, to stand up for the weak and the innocent, no matter the cost. They were the galaxy's watchmen, the guardians of justice and freedom. And they would never, ever back down. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.